Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So today is Monday, which means I'm going to be working in the sketchbook, and basically you can see that I've been getting a little bit closer and closer to finishing the sketchbook, but I do have still quite a few amount of pages left before we can hit the end of this particular sketchbook. So I am kind of planning on hopefully trying to finish the sketchbook by the end of this month, because I feel like I've been just taking up a lot of space in the sketchbook for way too long that I kind of want another fresh start again in a different sketchbook. So today's video is going to be kind of like a compilation of 3 different drawing sessions that I did throughout the week. So yeah, it'd be kind of like a mixture of both real-time and kind of time-lapse versions of different portions of the drawing, so that you guys don't have to sit and watch either really choppy footage for the entire video or watching an entire time-lapse for the entirety of the video. So for the first drawing session, I decided to kind of do another drawing to kind of match this one for Femine that I did last week, and I wanted to kind of approach it kind of similarly to how I did the other one in terms of just the colors. I'm keeping also the same subject, so I'm still drawing Femine, but I am drawing him with his helmet. And I have kind of like the sad expression because I forgot that his helmet actually has like a few different expressions that he can express via the screen of his helmet. And I was looking at them and I think all of them are really cute, but in terms of trying to fit it into the color scheme of today's, like the first session of the painting, I decided to go with the sad one just because of more of the blue kind of cooler tones that are more present in the Femine that is on the right. So just to make sure that it kind of matches. So in terms of the materials and the process of doing this particular sketch, I did sketch with just a big mechanical pencil or just with like HB lead for just like the entirety of the sketch, and then I went ahead and pulled out my watercolors again, and I did a few washes of color, and I'm trying to be a little bit particular on where I'm placing them, similar to how I did the upper Femine one, where I'm being a little bit more mindful of not keeping everything too vague when I'm kind of placing down the colors, just because even though my pencil lines will not disappear when I add the water, I still want to have a little bit more structure before I do the line work on top. And I did leave a little bit more of like splotchiness, or kind of leaving a little bit of drips at the very top. I didn't really mind. I think initially I just accidentally overloaded my brush, but I decided that I would just stick with that for the entirety of it and just let some of the little drips kind of dry as is, and then I will add a little bit to the bottom as well, just because I feel like it fits kind of with the water theme that Femine kind of has anyways, in terms of he's a diver. So I did want to keep that in. And while I'm kind of like letting the watercolor dry, I was kind of thinking on what I wanted to do for the line work. And I think in last week's video, I might have expressed the fact that I was getting sick and tired of like Inktober, or that I didn't really want to do too many inking videos for the rest of this month until the very end, just because I feel like because a lot of people are doing Inktober, or if you're participating in Inktober, I'm not sure if like you're getting burnt out of it as well, but at least when I'm doing my prompts for Inktober and I'm doing inking in a certain way and I'm doing kind of like a similar aesthetic across the board, I am getting a little bit sick and tired of it. But for all 3 sessions, I think, for today's video, I do end up inking in a very similar method. So for the one for Femine, I am sticking with the Pentel pocket brush pen, and the thing I like about this pen is that first, the ink is just a very nice kind of like matte black, but also the brush tip of this brush is very pointy, so I can get a lot of thin lines but also some thicker lines, and I can also just like place down some larger areas quite easily, or I can do a little bit of hatching or a little bit of texture here and there, which is kind of really nice to do with just one pen. So usually when I do any kind of inking, I definitely prefer something a little bit thinner, something a little bit more consistent, so that I don't have to worry about how much pressure I'm using. I don't have to really worry about line weight variation upon doing certain strokes with the pen itself. But with learning how to use this pen during Inktober, I found like a lot of appreciation for this pen, and I feel like I'm getting a lot more comfortable using it, even though I don't think I'm super proficient in using ink in general or using this pen in general. But I did have a lot of fun just like using it and just like practicing and playing around with what I can do with it, and getting a little bit better with like my hand coordination, and just making sure like if I do want thinner lines, like intentionally, I will also just use a lighter hand, make sure that it's consistent. I'm being very, I don't know, deliberate with the way how I mark the page, I guess, if that makes sense. I kind of do have a bit of an issue or trouble with finding a balance between being loose and very deliberate with your lines, if that makes sense. I feel like because I like structure a lot, or I feel like I like having control, I don't give myself that ability to really just like mess around, play around with the lines and let things be free. So I feel like that's also another reason why I don't really like doing line work, is because it's, for me, it feels very controlled, and I become very, I guess, like too meticulous with how I want the lines to look, to the point where I dislike the process. But I feel like because this I don't have like a very good grasp on, I will always have like little part of the lines that are going to be too thick or too thin, or you know, the line may break or it's a little shaky. So it kind of has all those little imperfections just because of how I use it. But that was the first session, and we'll flip the page and work on the second one. So you can see that there's still a lot of pages left in the sketchbook, so I'm trying my best to really chunk in a lot of different drawings or like sketching sessions here and there when I can. So there, I think, was one inking session that I did in between this one. So I'm basically sketching Reimu right now, and I'm gonna fill up the entire kind of spread with just doodles of Reimu in her, I guess her alternate outfit, like her first anniversary outfit, I believe. So the plan for this is that I did want to do a lot of also inking with the Pentel pocket brush pen, and Reimu has a nice amount of both kind of like pops of color, white and black. So I wanted to focus a lot on, like, you know, a little bit of color here and there, but I wanted to really play around with the shapes of the black in her outfit so I can utilize a little bit more of my pocket brush pen. So yeah, I'm not entirely burnt out from using ink. I think I'm just burnt out of Inktober, because when I do want to draw and use ink, it's quite fun and freeing, but drawing every day, kind of like of a similar theme, which is entirely my fault because I made my own prompts and I did box myself into drawing one person for the entirety of Inktober, and I do have like kind of like a specific format or process how I want to keep them all consistent. So that's probably on myself that I feel like I'm getting very sick and tired of it. But for these ones, I kind of find it a little bit fun because I'm kind of mixing and matching different ways how I usually doodle, and then instead of using fine liners or just like pigment liners or whatever, you have ballpoint pens, anything that has ink that wasn't my Pentel pocket brush pen. I've been having fun kind of like mixing and matching those, because I really do like how matte black, or how much black you can kind of chunk in for your sketchbook, or just like a traditional spread with color and stuff, but like it's done so easily, because any other time I want to have like a really nice consistent black on the page, I feel like the mediums that I use tend to bleed through to the next page or have like some really heavy ghosting. So when I was using the Pentel pocket brush pen for the Fremine piece, the page behind Fremine did not have anything that was like too precious in my case, like in my opinion. So I didn't really mind if there was going to be like heavy ghosting or if the ink was going to bleed through. But luckily the ink doesn't bleed through, so that kind of gave me the okay for me to continue using this ink in the sketchbook. And I find that the ghosting is very, 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 very faint. Like I can see a little bit, but that's like similar to like a lot of the other mediums that I use, where I can kind of see through the paper because the paper is just thin in general and it's not due to the ink. So yeah, I have my sketchbook in front of me so I can kind of reference what I'm looking at. So for the doodles of Reimu, I did end up drawing 4 different Reimus on the entirety of the spread going across. And just like how I like to format it usually is that I do one doodle and then I fit one kind of like behind, and I kind of like let them overlap just a little bit. But usually whatever I draw first is usually the most in the foreground, and whatever I draw last, it tends to be more in the background. So I decided that I'll leave in real time the inking process of the first Reimu, and then the rest of it will be all in time lapse, because this took me a lot longer than I would like to admit in terms of just like the entire session, just because I was not fully concentrating either. So there are going to be some areas where I might miss some details, or some parts might look a little bit different compared to my sketch, because I was just kind of going willy-nilly at some point because I just wanted to get the page done and kind of move on, because my brain was like, you should draw Akemi a little bit later. So I decided to do that, but I didn't film it instead because I don't know, I'll get to it when we get there, because I was not going to film the next session either in terms of for the video. But I did want to make the video for today to be more of a compilation of what I drew in the week in terms of like what's in my sketchbook. And even though I didn't draw a lot, it's kind of nice that I knocked out, I guess, technically 4 spreads? No, 1, I guess like technically you're seeing 2.5 in this video, but for me it's 3.5, I guess, because there was one other one kind of in between the second and the third session. And I kind of want to continue using the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen for the next few spreads, I think. It's just very easy for me to use. I feel like I really do enjoy the very bold matte black kind of look in terms of just like on a spread and everything. It just looks very cohesive depending on like the amount of black or like the amount of dark to white on your spread. So it's kind of fun, and I kind of want to embrace more of me using something that's not so thin, I guess, or something that can give me a lot of like meticulous detail. Even though I say that, I am kind of like trying to practice using the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen to the point where I do want to have the ability to do a lot of detail with the tip of this kind of like brush. So I think initially when I was practicing using this pen during Inktober, just like I think the day or two just leading up to Inktober, that I decided that I would practice with the pen, and I noticed that it had like a really long kind of stringy hair at the very tip of it, and I just chopped it off. I noticed that I didn't really like having that little straggly bit, because even though I could get thin lines, that little straggly bit tend to make things a little bit more harder for me to place down the brush where exactly I wanted it to be, because it would like, how to explain this, it makes contact with the paper first and then kind of takes the rest of the bristles with it when I place and squish down. So it kind of made things a little bit inaccurate, which made it easier for me to just be ever so careful, take scissors and just like snip off that tiny little baby hair off of it. And I can still get really thin lines if I am patient enough and have a very light hand, and also if the ink is flowing. I don't think, actually I think I did. In the, it might have been the Fremine video or the one before it. What was the one before Fremine's? I actually don't really remember. It might have been something talking about Inktober, I think. I don't really remember. Oh, it was the Miku one. So basically, I think I was talking about different inks that you could use in your Pentel Pocket Brush Pen. And I said to use like your favorite ink. Now, I did notice that the, what is this? Chinese black ink that I have, which is closer to, I guess, like an India ink kind of consistency. It did not flow as nicely in this pen, so it made very like watery looking ink marks, so it wasn't like entirely matte black. So I decided that I would buy new refills for it, and I did that for the majority of Inktober up until I think day 12, until I needed to basically refill it again, which I found my SpeedBall ink, which is also just an India ink. Oh, by the way, Reimu is done, or like the Reimu spread. I kind of really like it with the kind of hot pink in the background. Also, this is not the spread that we're going to work on, but just pretend it is. You probably can't tell the difference once we switch over anyways. So let me talk about this before I talk about the ink. So I have some sketches of Wonu based on... Ooh, I don't remember what he was modeling for, but he has this really cute kind of almost like a trench coat blazer that's more of like a sandy beige-ish color, very kind of like warm tone, but still very like light and airy and kind of bright. And then he had a really cute kind of fuzzy looking hoodie, kind of looks a little bit, I don't know, just like a fuzzy material. I definitely made it look more fluffier and fuzzier than it actually is in the pictures, but it looks super cute because it was just like white and beige, and his hair was styled very cutely. He had big frame glasses. I just think he looked really soft, so I wanted to do a spread of him for a video, but I lost track of time. And I was initially planning to do this spread with gouache, which might be the reason that some of the faces might look a little funny, because I was planning on resketching with my Prismacolor Coal Erase pencil on top of the already kind of like red sketch that I had down on the paper, so that I could fix them up a little bit, but also make some more cleaner lines that would stay, because otherwise my other lines would disappear with the water. But because I didn't really want to do any gouache today, or whenever I did do the spread for this, I decided that I would just do it some other day. But that some other day turned into me wanting to play around with ink once again. So for the left hand side, I decided to use water-based markers. So I believe these are the dual tip Tombow markers, and it's kind of like the pastel set. And then the other side, I'm using alcohol markers, which is the Ohuhu 320 set of alcohol markers. And I decided that I would just kind of fill out the colors a lot more for these ones on the right hand, just because I like these doodles a little bit more. I also think that the colors would have fit a little bit better, and I could play around with the ink a little bit later. So for the ones on the left, I did just stick with the pink and the blue, and then the ones on the right, I did pick more warmer colors, and you'll see my choice a little bit later, but Wanu's hair is kind of more of a natural black color, so I wanted to utilize the amount of black that I could get from the pocket brush pen. So even though I laid down a bunch of brown for his hair on the doodles on the right, I will fill in a lot of it to be black, but still leave a lot of the brown showing through, so that I don't completely get rid of what I just did. Otherwise, I feel like it was just useless for me to layer up that many colors together. But as I'm inking this spread, I think this is actually when I started to realize that the ink in the pen was really not flowing as nicely. So like I said, when I hit kind of like day 12 in Inktober, which is I think 2-3 days ago since you guys will see the video, I didn't really want to pop in another cartridge to refill the ink. I wanted to check out to see if my SpeedBall ink, which is an India ink, would be a better refill compared to the Chinese Sumi kind of India ink that I had from a previous, I don't know where I got it. I think it was just from my dad. I just got it from my dad at some point. And basically, I feel like it had a better consistency. It dries a little slower, but I also noticed that when it doesn't flow as nicely in the cartridge, it also kind of gives me that watery, kind of not matte black look. And it feels a lot more like, I don't know, a little streaky. You can kind of see it on the left-hand doodle earlier, but I guess my little Wonu icon on the bottom left-hand corner is covering it, but it kind of makes like the black areas look a little bit patchy and streaky. So every so often I will have to unscrew the back portion of the pen and then I will squeeze the cartridge ever so slightly so that hopefully I can get some ink running through the pen a little bit more quicker, instead of letting my pen sit upside down so that the ink can go to the bristles like naturally. But you can see that if the ink's working really nicely, I can get a lot of like thinner lines. I can kind of play around with the texture, and this is initially why I really wanted to switch over and do inking instead of doing a gouache painting for the spread, is that I did this doodle of Wonu kind of like with his eyes closed, and it's literally just of his eyes and kind of his glasses and his bangs. And I remember seeing the photo on Twitter, and people were just saying like, wow, like Wonu's eyelashes are really long, which I actually never really noticed that his eyelashes were that long until that photo, even though I draw them long for the entirety of Inktober. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that one because I could play around a little bit with the hair texture too, and I think it looks really pretty with kind of like the different strokes for the hair. And I kind of do something similar for the smaller one down here, which unfortunately I kind of botched his face a little bit because the shape of his face gets a little bit lopsided to one side, just because I didn't really use the natural pivot of my hand to the fullest extent. So for me, obviously, I feel like maybe it's for most people that you kind of swing your hand inwards. So regardless if you're left-handed or right-handed, I think swinging inwards might be a little bit more natural than swinging your hand the other way. I guess like up and down wouldn't really change because either way you're using your natural pivot. But you can see that I was using it on the left side of his jaw, and I don't know if I show it for the right side, but for the right side I was going down from the top right to kind of like the bottom left, or here I am showing it. You can see that I made it super round rather than angular, which means that I kind of cut into his jaw a lot more, which makes his other side, which is the left side, look a lot wider. So it's uneven, like one's more egg-shaped and the other one's more like has an angle, if that makes sense. So I try to even it out later, and yeah, I don't know, it looks slightly derpy because of that. I think also because just the placement of the nose and the mouth was a little bit too far apart, but I still like this one a lot just because I had a lot of fun inking the hair. I don't know if you can tell, I've been having a lot of fun just playing around with the pen quite a bit. And I'll definitely talk a lot more about the pen when we talk about Inktober, because I was looking at the sketchbook where I first got this pen, and I can tell I knew nothing about it, and I could tell that I was struggling with it because I would use it in conjunction with some of my fine liners, and I would only use that Pentel pocket brush pen to fill in large black areas rather than using it for both like thick and thin details. But yeah, that is basically it for today's sketchbook session. I basically rambled for 20 minutes, but yeah, that's 3 different sessions. We have Femine, we have the spread of Reimu, and kind of the random spread of Wonu, where I kind of split it in between water-based markers and the alcohol markers. I feel like the ones that I did with water markers just turned out a lot derpier, probably because I also did them a lot quicker, but the ones on the right look really pretty in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's it for today, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video, I believe, which might be the Inktober video, might be something else, we'll see. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!